purposely invite the rock and roll element into our community?
Well, what's wrong with a little entertainment?
Entertainment is fine, but this... we have lots of big acts that come through here. Ice Capades, Tiny Toons, Kenny G.
Kenny G.
Dr. Bones, Dr. Bones, Dr. Bones.
Good evening, this is Dr. Bones Live, and today my guests are Jill and Richard from Meter Bridge. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hi, thank you.
So good to have you on. It's just more than a pleasure, Jill, because I remember for a while, I saw you tweeting with a bunch of different people, and now and then I kind of throw in my 2 cents, and I'm glad I started talking to you because when I asked for some of the songs, when I was listening to the EP on SoundCloud, I was just really impressed, and like I told you in the email, is that it was kind of hard for me to choose to pick one song I wanted to play because they were all really good.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
And
Twitter.
well, and it's nice to talk to you because I know you're on Twitter quite a bit, and you're blowing up Facebook earlier tonight or this afternoon, which was awesome. And Richard, I know you're a huge music talker, so I'm glad to have you both here. So the first question I'm going to get to is the name Meter Bridge. How did you guys come up with that for yourselves?
I was looking at an old mixing console, and I noticed that the lights weren't working. That shoot up and down, the green to red. Where it blinks into the red. And then my buddy said, "Oh yeah, your meter bridge is broken." And I said, "Meter bridge?" And that's what that's called? He said, "Yeah, that's called a meter bridge." So that's where I nicked it from.
Well, you see, my first thought, I think maybe a lot of people too, is the thing of toll bridge, like an actual toll bridge.
Oh yeah.
So that was my first thought. Pardon?
Yeah, I know. We had a picture for a song we had on YouTube that showed one of those bridges when you go into Vancouver, BC, and I just sort of got mixed up with that kind of idea.
And we have a big orange bridge in Nelson where we live too.
I know. Unfortunately, I've only been as far as Alberta. I've never been all the way out to BC. I haven't got the chance yet. I want to, just haven't had the opportunity to make it out quite that far yet.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, I guess.
Well, yeah, you should come and we'll hang out.
All right, on. So this EP, guys. Well, let's get into the heart of this. When you guys got together and started making music together, were your influences initially different, or meaning like were you kind of maybe thinking maybe we'll do kind of like maybe like a rock duo first, or were you kind of straight into the electronic scene?
I think straight into the electronic post-punk kind of music, because if you take 10 bands, we like 7 of them equally together, and then maybe we differ a little bit. But as far as influences go, we're very closely influenced by the same artists, and not just musicians, but artists in general, and the whole sort of lifestyle around it.
Right, it's always a curiosity to me, just because when bands, artists, what have you, come together, a lot of times, they come together with a certain idea, but then that can just flip over and change. So it's interesting to me to see if sometimes if it kind of holds or it does change because they think, well, we've been listening to this, but this would be a lot cooler to do, so let's try this because this one's a challenge.
Yeah, I talk about that with people I work or do music in collaboration with them. There's always that idea that like what you said earlier about having to paraphrase you, you kind of have an idea that's consistent and you stay true to it. I think that has a lot more staying power and a longevity than trying to maybe go for the popular thing at the moment.
Right. No, fair enough. And, and that's the nice part about this is I've talked about it a few times on a few of my shows and Music Saturday included that I only recently in the past like 2.5 years, pretty much since I started doing this show, getting into the electronic ambient, that sort of scene, because before I kind of was focused on the stereotype like a lot of people are, where you hear this same house music all the time. It doesn't really vary too much. It's the same consistent beat. There's no, it doesn't seem like there's any depth or any consistency to it, at least as far as like change and evolving. So I was kind of turned kind of a blind eye to it until I kind of open up a little bit and then listen more and more. And I'm amazed at what I can find and just what actually goes into the music you guys make. Yeah, well,
that being said, I noticed that for years for myself, I didn't like what was going on in the sort of commercial or popular electronic scene because I felt like it was really heavily produced and just over the top. It was just always on this high energy level. And there's been some more recent influences in the last few years on us where they've taken electronic music and shaped it more around an ambient feel and more of a melodic feel than just the sort of heavy percussive downbeat. And to me, that's where I started to realize that it can be shaped into like tunes, like the way you shape the conventional instrumentation around, guitar, bass, and drums, and all that. And you can do the same thing with electronic music, and still, I personally feel I'm more creative with it because I just have so much more at my disposal as far as effects and plugins and synths and whatnot.
No, and fair enough. And just a quick side note, speaking of bands kind of being pushed and overproduced, one band comes to mind, and they were essentially a one-hit wonder, but it was kind of a push of trying to push, we'll call it kind of techno house in the mainstream. Is if you remember a band called Dirty Vegas.
Yeah, I do remember that.
The song Days Go By?
Yeah, I do remember it, yeah.
Right, and remember how heavily pushed that was and how much it was on the radio and that sort of thing. And that's, when you talked about that, that's the first band that came to mind.
Yeah, I think that destroys a potentially long career. I see that with other people I know. Like where we live, we have a couple of friends that actually work pretty seriously in the music industry, but they work on a very commercial level, and to communicate with them about longevity as far as being an artist, and as opposed to getting that song on the radio in the top 40 or whatever, and just like you say, pushing the song. Those people don't seem to have much of a career after it happens, and I don't know. That's just what I've noticed. And that's one of the reasons why I like a more underground, independent scene, because you have more artistic license that way.
Hey, absolutely right, Richard. And I'll tell you, when I started listening, I want to know his finding stuff. I'd always heard, never I've not physically listened to, but heard from other people saying, the UK underground is really good stuff. You should listen to it. I was like, well, yeah. And by that time, it wasn't really heavily at my disposal. So it was hard to find, or you had to pay an arm and a leg to get an import of some sort.
Yeah,
but then
that for us too. Yeah.
And then when it started coming around a little bit, it was just like, wow, I was pleasantly impressed, and I was like, well, I'm glad now it's more at my disposal because this is a great music, and I people were absolutely right when they said the good stuff kind of came out of that area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for us anyways, it's very influential on our development over the years. Just in our taste of music, we've always, as a result of having, we grew up during that time where those bands were they're very hard to access where we lived.
Right.
And having, I guess maybe made the effort to find that scene and maybe make music in that scene. It helped shape us as people too, because there's kind of a lifestyle that goes along with it. It's kind of bohemian, It's
okay.
So I don't know. I mean, it's just sort of, it's not only so much a music, but it's kind of like a lifestyle and a community. Like people that like,
it is a great community too.
People that like synth music and that are into electronic music, they're not really the same. They're a different kind of lot that are into the kind of rock and roll, or even people that are into the country and western music or
right.
whatever. It's definitely and it's I think by and large a lot of people in the mainstream maybe don't get it, so it keeps it kind of nice and
cloistered somewhat.
yeah, exactly.
No, fair enough, but it's a good thing because since I've started playing the songs from your EP, we've got a lot of listeners from across the pond for us, but also a lot of other people like around the area, like within Canada too, and it's nice to see people reach out because it's one of those things where I found personally, there's a lot of bands on Twitter, but it's hard to find some Canadian bands that are, in my opinion, decent, or even just around, because most of them, they may have a Twitter, but they're never around. And after a few times, I kind of give up. It's like, I tried really want to, but I seem to get better response from really across the ocean.
Yeah, Twitter is really on fire, and I think it's really helped us just get heard, because it was December 31st, 2013 when we first posted something on SoundCloud.
Right.
And it took 2 months. And what we did was we joined groups. So we just looked at synth genre groups, synth pop, even dream pop, and I don't know, just a whole range of post-punk and all that. And we joined these groups, and all of a sudden, like in February, we were getting heard. So it's great.
And now there was the new group created called We Are the New Underground. How has that helped you guys out? How do you like that?
Well, it's just really cool to be in a group where it's being circulated all the time, and it's specifically for electronic.
Right.
Like we're on another group where it's a huge range, and the website is daunting. Like you go on there, and we're on one in India too called Radio Float.
Oh, nice.
And, they're daunting. Like you look at them and you're like, holy, look at all these bands, right? So to be on something that's just specifically electronic, and it's kind of like it's narrowed in so that you can really get people who like that kind of music listening.
Well, right, and I've actually, I'm sure you guys know this, but I interviewed Allmark not too far back.
Yeah, we were listening to that interview, actually.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Yeah, it was good.
So I interviewed him a few times, and we were talking about this on and off, and then he created this thing, so I know he's kind of fully devoted into it, but it's nice because he introduced me to some new people, like Lai Craze.
Yeah.
And,
she's amazing.
Yeah, I love her, so he introduced me to her, and Jazzy Cat, and
love her.
And it's such a nice community, and I mean I've met so many good people and interviewed most of them, like Peter Klein.
Yeah, Peter Klein.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah.
Analog Wave, all these guys are such fantastic people, and they're so nice to talk to, and it gives me such more appreciation, because I remember when I interviewed Peter Klein, I think he was the first electronic artist or ambient artist I interviewed, and I admittedly, I had a hard time preparing for it because I'd never interviewed someone like this before, just because I'd never done electronic music before, /ambient. So it was a lot of fun. It was a challenge for me too. That's what made it so much better.
Well, Well, Peter Klein was one of the first guys that we bought his album when we first started getting to know everybody over in the UK, and